A pallid glow filtered through the viewport as stability fields flickered into life, casting wavering shadows across the cavernous docking bay of the Prometheus. Years of asteroid dust and micrometeorite pockmarks had dulled her once gleaming hull. Now arcing weld beams danced along fractured seams, binding broken plating, reawakening the dormant Leviathan. Engineer teams scurried along service catwalks, their exosuits hissing hydraulic whispers as they installed fresh conduit and ray-calibrated gravimetric stabilizers. Serena Marlowe stood at the central console, the stern lines of her uniform crisp against the dim red emergency illumination. She ran gloved fingers over the schematic holo display, tracking power flow from the main reactor to the inertial dampeners. In her mind, she replayed the countless briefings and simulations, each drill designed to prepare her for this moment. But simulations couldn't replicate the weight of history pressing in on her at that instant. The legacy of her father, Admiral Jonathan Marlowe, who had led the Prometheus into the darkest hour of the consolidation wars, only to watch her rooted and abandoned among the drifting ice fields of Jura's Reach. Core stabilization at 50%, reported Dr. Hideo Sakurai, voice calm yet taut. He tapped a datapad, recalculating fusion injection rates. His graying hair was streaked with luminescent coolant residue, a badge of sacrifice for the past week's non-stop work. We'll need another quarter cycle boost to bring the gravity plates online. Otherwise, we risk structural resonance across the aft hangar. Serena swallowed. The gravity plates were critical for crew safety and mass drive harmonics. Without them, any FTL jump could tear the ship apart from within. She turned to Chief Engineer Margot Fell, whose stern gaze betrayed exhaustion and urgency in equal measure. Margot, run the override sequence. Bypass the primary coolant loop and engage the tertiary emergency injectors. I want those grav plates at 80% in 5 minutes. Margot's jaw clenched in mechanical precision. Understood, Captain. She swiped a hand through the holo interface, her fingers tracing a complex sequence of fractal patterns. The cavern shook as auxiliary pumps roared to life, pumping supercooled biosynthetic fluid through reinforced conduits across the bay. The great circular plates groaned and clicked, sliding into position like ancient gears in a colossal clock. Serena exhaled, relief and trepidation mingling in her chest. Good. Now reroute 50% of the reactor's output to the inertial dampeners. We can't risk any misalignment during the jump. Affirmative. Hideo's eyes flickered toward the data stream. Reactor core at 78%. Diverting. Now. Power lines shimmered beneath reinforced conduits, humming with raw fusion energy. The ship's broad array of sensor dishes, all 27 of them, winked on in succession, scanning the belt for microasteroid hazards. The Prometheus was awakening, limb by titanic limb. In the command atrium above, Lieutenant Nix Calder monitored the main calm channels. Radar echoes and spectral scans pulsed across her display. Captain, all decks report readiness. Hangars clear, fighters fueled, missiles primed. Sleepers have been roused and given quarters. We're green. Across the board, Serena allowed herself a small nod. Excellent, Lieutenant. I want the crew assembled in the briefing lounge in 15 minutes. We jump at 20. Nix stiffened. Yes, ma'am. Serena left the docking bay, her boots echoing along the metallic corridor. As she ascended, the corridor widened into the heart of the Prometheus, a great cylindrical atrium where corridors branched off, like the veins of some titanium leviathan. The ship, once decommissioned and sealed with centuries-old dignity, now hummed with life. Overhead, the main grav field generators glowed a ghostly cerulean, bathing the curved walls in a spectral light. In the officers' mess below deck, crew members gathered around polished tables, exchanging nervous glances and hushed greetings. Many were too young to remember the Prometheus's original glory. For them, she was just the supercarrier they'd trained on, a symbol of Earth's resurgence. Yet they felt her weight in every beam of the bulkhead, every creaking servomotor. Serena walked through the crowd, her presence commanding silence. By mere proximity, crew, she began, voice steady and resonant. Today, we do what no human ship has done in over a century. We bring back to life the Prometheus. We stand at the cusp of a new era, where humanity will no longer cower in the shadow of the Galactic Coalition. You've trained for this, you've sacrificed for this. Now, we show the galaxy what it means to be Terran. Applause rippled through the room, hesitance melting into pride. Serena met each pair of eyes, daring them to doubt her resolve. Mark my words, the Coalition will tremble at our return, and they will learn that humanity's will cannot be defied. Moments later, in the jump drive chamber, Serena and her bridge crew surrounded the ancient void nexus, a cylindrical array of crystalline nodes suspended in a quantum flux field. The hum was deafening. Holographic schematics flickered around it, mapping every choke point and harmonic resonance. Lieutenant Calder keyed in the final coordinates, a calculated slipspace vector that would ferry them just outside Coalition space, far enough to avoid immediate interdiction, but close enough to send the Alliance a message they couldn't ignore. Serena's heart pounded. Power to the Nexus, she ordered. Technicians confirmed. Energy blood from the primary conduits into the Nexus magnets. The chamber's field coils glowed white-hot. As the countdown reached 0, Serena pressed her palm to the activation pad. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then, the world shattered into streaks of light. They emerged in the void mere nanoseconds later, or perhaps years. Time itself seemed to twist under the strain of the jump. Outside the reinforced viewport, stars stretched into iridescent filaments. Then, sharp and sudden, they snapped back into pinpricks of light, and there it was, the pale shimmer of Coalition border patrols at Sector 47 Delta. Dozens of frigate signatures lit up the tactical displays, converging on the anomaly on the human Supercarrier that had been dead for 100 years. Serena's eyes shone with fierce exhilaration. All hands, battle stations, humanity's giant has awakened, and in the depths of space, the Prometheus began her long, defiant roar. The sudden appearance of the Prometheus in the outer reaches of Coalition space triggered alarms across half a dozen star systems. In the hushed corridors of the SSV Exemplar, flagship of Admiral Jorvik Thaurus's 4th Fleet, every tactical station sprang to life. Holoboards glowed with the human carrier's silhouette, 12 kilometers of armored might, bristling with railguns, missile silos, and void lance turrets. Coalition officers exchanged startled glances. No one had anticipated humanity's supercarrier to return so soon or so boldly. Admiral Thaurus, fresh from a ceremonial debrief in the Council's spired citadel, stormed onto the command bridge. His fleet's 6 destroyers, 8 frigates, and a pair of escort corvettes was a modest contingency, tasked with policing renegade mining operations. Now, they faced the single most potent warship in Terran history. Report, Thaurus barked, voice echoing against the reinforced bulkheads. Lieutenant Kesaval, tactical officer, tapped rapidly at her console. Sensors confirm, FTL engines are still stabilizing. They've drifted sublight to our coordinates approximately 15,000 kilometers out. No fleet support detected. Thaurus's eyes narrowed. So it's just us. Ready the quasar, lances and battery pods. Send this message on all channels. You are in violation of Coalition treaties. Stand down immediately or be neutralized. A murmur of assent rippled through the bridge. The Exemplar's gravitic projectors hummed, charging twin quasar lances to maximum yield. Back aboard the Prometheus, the command deck was a storm of activity. The aft viewport framed an expanse of star-speckled void. The distant glint of the Coalition task force advanced like a hunting pack. Officer Nix Calder's fingers danced over the comm panel. Coalition flagship demanding our surrender, she reported. Her tone carried a steely undercurrent, seasoned by weeks of training and exhaustion. Serena Marlowe stood at the slightly raised command dais, the low red glow of battle stations casting sharp shadows on her determined face. Let them send a fleet if they dare, she replied. Open channel. A holographic transmission flickered into view. Admiral Thaurus's stern countenance, framed by the Exemplar's command arch. Terran vessel, you are outnumbered 3-1. Surrender, and your crew will be spared. Resist, and you will be annihilated. Serena's pulse surged. She refused to acknowledge fear. Admiral Thaurus, I am Captain Serena Marlowe. The Prometheus has returned to remind the Coalition that Earth's people will not bow to intimidation. Release your threat and stand down, else we will disable your flagship's warp manifolds and liberate you from arrogance. Thaurus's jaw tightened. So be it. The holo snapped off. Brace for engagement, Serena ordered. Weapons to maximum readiness on the tactical display. The relative sizes of the fleets were clear. 3 destroyer squadrons formed a crescent around the human carrier's flanks, while for frigate groups loomed at longer range a pair of missile corvettes circled wide, their purpose ominous. Lieutenant Derek Sloan, weapons officer, keyed the first salvo. Lance batteries primed, torpedo bays at 70% charge. Serena exhaled and gave the order, fire, at once. A cascade of pulses erupted from the Prometheus's hull. Void lances carved deadly streaks toward the nearest destroyers. Shockwave torpedoes arced out, tracking on thermal signatures. The Coalition vessels reacted swiftly, their energy shields flaring against the onslaught. Explosions bloomed as the human lances struck home, ripping through to destroyer hulls in rapid succession. One collapsed inward, its starboard wing sheared. Away, the other spiraled, reactor breach igniting a brilliant orange plume. Direct hits. Derek shouted, a grim satisfaction in his voice. But the Coalition was not unprepared. In response, the Exemplar's quasar lances split the darkness, their concentrated streams of charged particles cleaving metal and composite plating. The port side shield generator of the Prometheus flickered under the sustained beam, its energy reserves draining rapidly. Shields at 30%, cried Dr. Hideo Sakurai, monitoring the power conduits. We're overloaded. Serena seized the tactical rail. Divert all excess power to forward shields and the inertial dampeners. Override safety protocols if you must maintain hull integrity. A hiss of warning trembled through the comms, then compliance. Subordinate engineers hurried to reconfigure the main bus, rerouting reactor output. Inside the artery-like conduits, ions roared. The shields flared back to life, barely. Clinging to cohesion. Across the deck, fighter-ready rooms opened. Lambda-class interceptors, sleek and lethal, launched in tight formations. Their afterburners glowing blue-white. Interceptor Flight Alpha and Beta, engage. Serena commanded, protect our flanks. Lando wings converged on incoming Coalition. Corvettes and bombers, their missiles exploding in spectacular collisions. Dogfights erupted in miniature across the battlefield. Tracer streaks, energy pips, and fighter ejections. Admiral Thaurus watched from the Exemplar's command pod, Fury, creasing his gaunt features. His destroyers, though battered, closed the distance, concentrating return fire on the Prometheus's bow. Focus on their forward railgun cluster. He ordered, if we knock out their main armament, we can contain them until reinforcements arrive. The Exemplar's squadrons obeyed. Swarms of missiles and lance beams homed in on the forward turrets. 2 massive spires of railguns, each the size of a castle turret, erupted in sparks and debris as lead tracking penetrated armor. Alarms screamed aboard the human carrier. Railgun cluster destroyed. Lieutenant Sloan panted, we're losing. Firepower. Serena's jaw set. Then we adapt. Activate secondary pulse cannons and deploy offer torpedo nets. Prepare point defense clusters on manual override. Below decks, maintenance bots and crew rushed to redirect munitions to backup batteries. Nearby, the hangar deck's magnetic clamps primed mobile drone turrets, sending hundreds of black, spider-like sentinels skittering across the grid. Above, the Prometheus pivoted on gravitic suspension thrusters, a subtle but impossible feat. For a vessel of her mass, she angled starboard, presenting her starboard flank. Secondary batteries spun to life, unleashing volleys of microrail flechettes that shredded enemy drone clouds and disrupted missile guidance rays. A hush fell over the Exemplar's bridge. The once certain destruction of the human giant had stalled. Report, Thaurus grated. Enemy pulse cannons are tearing into our shield grids. Casaval replied. They're digging in, forming choke points. Our advanced squadrons are breaking under concentrated fire. Thaurus's lips thinned. Then send the frigates in, crush them before they can regroup. In the void between the 2 leviathans, frigate skirmishes erupted anew. Coalition ships swarmed toward the Prometheus's empty base, tempted to ram, to board, to swarm. But at each breach point, the human carrier unleashed hidden defenses, plasma spread fields that incinerated hull plates, railgun point defenses that snapped incoming fighters in two, and energy nets that tangled missiles until they detonated harmlessly. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Serena stood unmoving, eyes blazing with fierce determination. Around her, the deck thrummed under the strain, but no tremor reached her feet. Status, she demanded. Shields holding at 60%. Hideo reported. Hull integrity at 92. Reactor stable. Serena allowed a fraction of a smile. Continue the bombardment. Target their engine cores, deny pursuit. Derek's fingers danced again. A precise volley of torpedoes arched toward the nearest frigate class. The explosions rippled through the formation like a stone dropped into still water shockwaves, scattering the coalition vessels in every direction. On the Exemplar's bridge, the holo display blinked and shimmered. For the first time, Admiral Thalra saw the impossible. The Prometheus was not merely resisting, she was dominating. He closed his eyes long enough to swallow his pride. When he opened them again, he gave the order nobody on his bridge thought he would: fall back. We regroup at Nebula Station Echo. A stunned silence. Then, as the coalition fleet reversed course, the tense crescendo of laser fire and torpedo salvos receded. The Prometheus's fighters pursued for only a moment, enough to ensure no ship lagged behind, then retreated back under her protecting bulkheads. Serena Marlowe watched the coalition vessels fade into the starfield. Round her, the bridge teams exhaled, muscles unclenching. Hull plating glowed faintly from recent impacts. Coolant vents hissed across the decks. She straightened, voice calm but resolute. Inform the UTA High Command. The Prometheus has made herself known. The coalition will think twice before testing Earth's resolve again. And as the battered human supercarrier drifted in the aftermath of her thunderous defiance, one immutable truth echoed through every channel in the galaxy: humanity will not be defied. Smoke curled through the corridor outside the sick bay, mingling with the sterile scent of antiseptic and the hiss of emergency respirators. Hull plating above bore the scars of the recent engagement, blackened scorch marks and jagged tears where missile impacts had blown vents outward. Within the dimly lit medical bays, medics in stained scrubs and face masks moved with urgent precision, weaving between bunks, cradling the wounded. Each breath from the injured reverberated like a tolling bell, a reminder that victory had come. At too steep a price, Serena Marlowe stood at the doorway, her shoulders rigid beneath the folds of her uniform. She watched as Chief Surgeon Lyra Stoneman administered a plasma clotting injector to a lamplit pilot whose right arm had been shredded by shrapnel. The pilot's girlfriend, also wounded, held his hand, tears staining her cheek. Serena closed, her eyes against the ache in her chest. She had commanded the return of the Prometheus, but she could not command the cost. We've received 55 casualties and 17 fatalities so far, Stoneman reported quietly. And the morgue's capacity is nearly full. We're diverting trauma teams from Sickbay 3. Serena nodded. Keep me informed of any changes. And I want the crew told exactly what's happened, no sugarcoating. We owe them honesty. As she turned, a plaintive cry cut through the bay. Serena paused by a young corporal gripping her wounded leg. The corporal's wide eyes met Serena's. "Captain," she whispered, her voice trembling with shock and pain. Serena knelt to meet her gaze, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You've done us proud," she said softly. "We'll get you patched up. Rest now." The corporal managed a faint nod before slipping into unconsciousness. In the command atrium, pale glare lamps illuminated panels that still glowed red with warning lights. Serena joined Captain Idris Voss and Dr. Hideo Sakurai before the central holomap, which now showed the battered remnants of Coalition destroyers regrouping near Nebula Station Echo. "Less than a day's hyperspace run. We can't stay here indefinitely," Voss said, voice tight. "Supplies are running low, and our shields have taken irreversible strain, even with the UTA fleet arriving soon. We need time to complete essential repairs." Dr. Sakurai's face was drawn beneath dark circles. The jump cores stabilized, but without full grav plate functionality. Every hyperspace transit risks structural fatigue. We need at least 3 hours to recalibrate, and our stock of pulse cannons is down by 30%. Serena studied the map. The coalition would not allow their humiliation to stand unanswered. We'll hold orbit at this waypoint, she decided. Order drone battalions to mine the outer approach. Let no ship risk a blind run. Meanwhile, dispatch med teams to retrieve survivors from the drifted wreckage. Voss raised an eyebrow. Their recovery convoys will be protected by frigate screens. Serena's gaze hardened. Then we'll clear those screens. Humanity's wounded deserve rescue. Below decks, the engineering sector trembled with the rhythm of emergency thrusters. Sparks sputtered from a ruptured power conduit as engineers swarmed to patch secondary lines. Dr. Sakurai was mid-inspection when a thunderous clang echoed through the deck. A deliberate jolt. Not born of battle damage, did you feel that? He muttered, wiping grease from his forehead. Before the others could respond, a white-hot flare erupted from a junction box, incinerating to technicians in a blast of molten plasma. Heido leaped back, shielding his face. Alarms shrieked as floodlights bathed the corridor in crimson. Sabotage, he gasped, rushing to shut down the feeder line. Someone's tampered with the fusion regulators. Moments later, Serena arrived, flanked by Lieutenant Nix Calder and Security Chief Yarrick Tolvan. Caldwell's jaw clenched as she surveyed the scorched bulkhead. Protocol calls for an immediate lockdown, Tolvan said, voice low. We must quarantine this sector. Serena glanced at the blown panel. Any unauthorized personnel here, Tolvan shook his head. Logs don't show anyone besides the engineering shift, but records can be altered. In that instant, unease settled like a weight in her gut. The coalition's wrath might drive them to every dirty tactic. But who on her crew could have turned traitor? Seal off all access points, Serena ordered. Sweep for anomalies, and feed every security camera to Central. Someone's hiding. Hours later, with shockwaves settling and the injured transferred to secured medbays, Serena convened her officers in the conference suite. The atmosphere was thick with apprehension. Voss leaned forward, voice grave. If the coalition planted a saboteur, they're closer than we thought. They could strike the reactor next, or worse, shut down life support. Calder's fingers tapped an anxious rhythm on the table. We've run facial recognition sweeps against our roster. No flagged identities yet. Whoever did this knows our protocols intimately. Dr. Sakurai pushed his glasses up, exhaustion lining his features. Damage control teams are stretched thin. Every diversion risks greater wear on the ship. If we start hunting ghosts, we might miss real threats. Serena paced the length of the table. Then we do both. Voss, bolster external defenses, mines, drones, ionic nets. Calder, tighten surveillance. Tolvan, root out the saboteur, no matter how painful. And Hideo, implement manual overrides on all critical systems. We won't be held at the mercy of one hidden bomb. A tense silence fell. Then Nix Calder spoke, voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Captain, I'll start with the crew manifest. Anyone recently transferred. Anyone whose background doesn't check out. Serena nodded. Good. And send word to the Utah fleet. We'll join them at Echo in 4 hours. Tell Admiral Hayes we've sustained internal damage and require immediate docking priority. As the meeting broke, Serena found a moment alone in the observation dome. The nebula beyond swirled in ghostly blues and purples, beauty born of violent cosmic forces. She pressed her palm against the glass, letting her reflection merge with the stellar glow. Her mind drifted to memories of her father commanding the Prometheus in its prime. The pride in his eyes as he drove her to excel. But pride could blind leaders to danger. Serena whispered into the silence, I will not let that be my failure. Below, the ship's heartbeat on wounded but alive. Each system restored, each life saved came at a price. Yet every sacrifice hardened their resolve. The coalition would muster its fleets. Allies would hesitate. But Serena Marlowe would stand watch over her crew, her ship, and her people. Tonight, in the quiet before the storm, she resolved that defiance demanded not only courage, but relentless vigilance. and she would pay whatever cost lay ahead to ensure humanity's spirit remained unbroken. The meditative hum of the Prometheus's gravitic generators thrummed softly beneath Serena Marlowe's boots as she strode from the docking bay into the vast atrium of Nebula Station Echo. The station, a tangled web of metallic spokes and rotating rings, glinted like a star itself against the swirling iris of the nearby nebula. Around her, UTA engineers and medical teams flanked coalition envoy vessels, their crews busying themselves with last-minute preparations for the historic summit to come. Serena paused on the observation gallery, her reflection merging with the kaleidoscope of colors beyond. 3 days ago, she had stood on this same deck in the grip of war. Now, she prepared to stand in the fragile peace born of that conflict. The corridors behind her echoed with sympathetic, calm chatter UTA letters, and coalition officers sharing guarded greetings, exchanging protocols, and in hushed tones, speculating on what treaty terms might emerge. Point 1. Unlikely alias at precisely 0800. Station time. Serena stepped onto the polished floor of the council chamber, a domed hall lit by crystalline chandeliers that cast fractured rainbows across the assembled delegates. On one side stood the flag bearers of the United Terran Assembly, Admiral Hayes, dignified in his silver-trimmed uniform, and Ambassador Renata Voss, her diplomatic poise unshaken by the weight of history. Opposite them were the envoys of the Galactic Coalition, Councillor Murtal, his fair eyes reflecting cautious optimism, High Admiral Larocco of the Siphon Fleet, her placid expression belying her reputation for ruthless strategy, and the Drell representative, Grand Magistrate Penthov. Serena took her place at the central dais. The chamber fell silent, save for the soft, rhythmic pulse of the station's core. Serena's voice, amplified by the resonance fields, cut clearly through the hush. Honorable councillors, admirals, and representatives, we gather today not as victors and vanquished, but as custodians of a fragile accord. That accord was forged in the crucible of our recent conflict, its terms written in the price paid by the brave souls who served aboard the Prometheus and across coalition fronts. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. Hayes inclined his head, and Murtal's spindly fingers hovered over the treaty script projected beside him. 2. Drafting the charter for the next 4 hours, the chamber buzzed with delicate negotiation. Ambassador Voss and Councillor Murtal parsed every clause, from trade tariffs on Thalron or to shared defense protocols in contested sectors. Serena watched as terms evolved. Sovereign equality. Humanity would hold a permanent seat on the Coalition Council, with voting rights equal to other founding members. Mutual Defense Pact. Coalition and UTA fleets would conduct joint patrols along human space borders, deterring piracy and external threats. Technology exchange. Humanity would share its advanced plasma lattice shielding designs in exchange for coalition-developed subspace communication arrays. Reparations clause. The coalition would fund the reconstruction of devastated Terran colonies, a gesture acknowledging the blood spilt at Stratus Station and elsewhere. Between clauses, Serena's gaze drifted to the window. A cluster of UTA frigates and coalition corvettes conducting maneuvers in perfect synchrony, their wingtip signatures arcing in coordinated grace. It was the most compelling proof that two fleets, once locked in deadly rivalry, could now move as one. 3. Shadows of betrayal. As the final draft took shape, a sudden security alert rippled through the chamber's calm. Yarek Talvin's voice crackled in Serena's ear. Captain, we've detained the saboteur. An undercover operative from the coalition extremist faction, the Obsidian, hand-planted the charges. In engineering, he confessed to orders aimed at reigniting war. Serena's pulse quickened. She rose, addressing the assembly. Before we sign, know that even as we build peace, shadows linger at its edges. The Obsidian hand sought to destroy not just the Prometheus, but our chance at accord. Let this tribunal consider their fate, and let it stand as testament that betrayal will meet justice. Councillor Murtal's eyes flickered anger, then solemn resolve. He signaled to his guards, who escorted the trembling extremist away. A hush followed, the gravity of near disaster settling over all. Then, in a moment of shared understanding, Ambassador Voss extended a hand to Murtal. He clasped it, and applause rippled through the chamber. 4. Signing on the edge of Hopi 1243 station time. The final signatures gleamed on the holo scroll of the Echo Covenant. Serena pressed her star-etched seal beside the UTA emblem. Myrtle followed with the Coalition tri-stars. Lights round the chamber dimmed, leaving only the Covenant floating in silvery projection. Hear this pledge, intoned the council's speaker. Let it stand for all galaxies to see, that despite the horrors of war, cooperation can prevail, that strength tempered by honor forms the true shield of civilization. The assembled dignitaries rose, their voices lifting in the unison of a vow. Outside, the fleets executed a grand salute laser, beacons weaving between capital ships in a silent ballet of light. 5. Peace forged by firelighter. On the Prometheus's upper promenade, Serena stood beside Admiral Hayes as they watched Coalition dignitaries depart in their sleek shuttles. The hull of the carrier, bristling with new repairs and fresh paint, gleamed beneath the stations. Flood lamps, tobacco-stained benches, and potted Terran ferns lined the walkway, a small touch of home in this frontier outpost. Hayes clapped Serena on the shoulder. You did it, Captain. You carried more than a warship across the void. You carried our people's future. Serena let out a slow breath. It wasn't just me, my crew, the UTA fleet. Even those Coalition officers who chose unity over vengeance. Without them, there'd be no Covenant today. Hayes smiled. Still, you led the way. Serena turned her gaze to the star-dusted expanse beyond the promenade's glass. A cluster of traded freighters, Coalition and human emblems side by side, drifted in cargo lanes toward Terran space. Above them, the nebulous spirals glowed softly like the promise of dawn after a long, dark night. 6. Beyond the horizon, in the quiet that followed, Serena's thoughts drifted to her father's old command logs, preserved in the ship's archives. He had once written that victory is meaningless without a just peace. Now, standing on the threshold of that peace, she felt the weight of his wisdom settle in her heart. The future remained uncertain. Fractured worlds, old grudges, and new threats no doubt lay ahead. But for this moment, Serena allowed herself hope that the Prometheus, once a symbol of defiance and destruction, would now patrol the borders of peace. A guardian rather than a harbinger of war, she bowed her head, whispering a silent vow. To the ship and its crews, may our covenant hold, may our unity endure, and may no force in all the galaxy ever defy humanity's right to stand among the stars. With that, Captain Serena Marlowe turned from the observation glass, her silhouette framed by the nebula's iridescent glow. The next chapter of history awaited, and the revived human Supercarrier, renewed in purpose, was ready to write it.